Welcome to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam. Slow news today, because we're in the pre-period, the period before San Diego Comic-Con, where you end up with all of this lull of news. I mean, I could sit here and go over casting news for a ballad of songbirds and birds and snakes, but it'd be about as useful as going through the casting news for the Hunger Games when the Hunger Games was first announced back in 2019. In so much as it's not, because it's a bunch of people you don't know or care about at that point. Like in 2011, when we were talking about who was going to be in the Hunger Games, it's like Jennifer Lawrence was not quite the name she is now. She actually was probably just about as big as Rachel Zegler is in the lead of this, because Rachel Zegler, I think Jennifer Lawrence only really had that one movie. I think she had been in Winter's Bone at that point, and when the Hunger Games came out, Silver Linings Playbook hadn't come out yet. And there also hasn't been a big, and here is, what's her name? Elizabeth Banks as Effie, and, all the other things. And I feel like it's just kind of, there isn't enough to go on to really discuss the casting in depth, considering a lot of the characters and actors are not huge names as of right now. They may become names after, but right now they're not. So what we have is we're going to talk about, because last week was the 20th anniversary of the release of Lilo and Stitch. And I watched Lilo and Stitch last night. Though that was... I didn't know it was the 20th anniversary. I had seen an interview, or I had seen a message, not a message, but a blurb from an interview that I agreed with when I read it. It was like, Frozen gets all the credit for being the first Disney movie that's really about a sisterly bond, but that's not the case. Lilo and Stitch was, and that is true. Lilo and Stitch is about that sisterly bond between Nani and Lilo, and looking at that, I think it's pretty clear why Frozen is the one that gets that attention, not Lilo and Stitch. And I think one of the other things is that it's so weird when you look at Disney during the 2000s. Because during the 2000s, Pixar was, a lot of huge movies came out for Pixar, and then they kind of petered out as they got to the 2010s. But the 2000s was, for Disney, they didn't have many huge movies that did, that did a lot of money. They had, had the staying power, really. I think Bolt was in the late 2000s. Meet the Robinsons, I think, was the late 2000s. Brother Bear, I think, got a theatrical release. Fritz and the Frog was 2009. And then, a lot of the movies that came out in that era didn't stick the way Lilo and Stitch did. And I think Lilo and Stitch stuck because of Stitch. Because it was, it's this character who is not, he's not speaking well. He's easy to translate abroad. And he's slapstick. And then it attempted to be emulated with, really, the movie is very clearly pulled for Home by DreamWorks, but Home does it a lot less well. And when you look at, the other movies that came out in that era, I'm not 100%... Because here's the thing, too. I was born in the, let's say, mid-90s. Because I would say, 94 would have been... Yeah, that's mid. I would say 90 to 93 would be early. 94 to 97, or 96, or 97 would be mid. And then 98 to... Or let's say 96, 94 to 96 mid. 97 to 99 late. And again, depending on where you fall in that range, you may be closer. But with where I was and where I was, developmentally at that point, I had fallen out of viewing favor of Disney movies, because there is this rebellious streak that kids get, where they're like, oh, that's a kid's movie, I'm not a little kid anymore, I don't want to watch this. Also, at that age, Star Wars was taking up a fuck ton of my bandwidth, because the prequels were out in force. And that was, that was something that was taking a lot of my bandwidth. So, like, what Disney movies were coming out wasn't something exactly on my radar, especially when you take into consideration everything else that was happening in pop culture. Like, for me, video games, it's like, Pokemon was, be-all, end-all, because I think this comes out a year before Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire. And that was something that was, huge for me. I think they're still among my favorite games. But look, looking at it that way and looking at, this is what was happening, I'm not entirely sure, like, that's probably why, for me at least, they didn't stay. But it's not like we can point to just me and say they didn't stay, because there were some movies that I don't think Disney had, or maybe Disney had just acquired Pixar, but like, Ratatouille, The Incredibles, these movies stuck and managed to, worm their way in, and not just for me, but also broadly for Disney viewing audiences. Like, I don't think anyone really talks about Brother Bear. I mean, I think the last time I heard anyone talk about Brother Bear would have been, would have been when Chadwick Boseman died. Because up until Chadwick Boseman died, I didn't know he was in that movie. Because I don't think I've ever seen it. What other ones were it? Like Bolt, I think I was like, oh, fuck that. Like a adult with superpowers who gives a shit. And I think Lilo and Stitch, for me, again, from a lot of this comes down to for me. Lilo and Stitch kind of hit that spot where not only did it have the movie itself, but it had, episodic TV that went along with it. So, like, that kind of fell into, for me, again, I'm saying it for me, the same category as, like, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, which was, I'm going to say it again, I said in my review on Beware of Spoilers for Lightyear, I will say Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, The Adventure Begins, was a better origin story for the character. It's a better movie, and it's more entertaining than Buzz Lightyear of, Buzz Lightyear, or Lightyear was. And just more fun. Like, Lightyear felt dour. And I'm like, this is a movie that you're going to show a 6-year-old kid, and he's going to become enamored with these characters? Like, no way. And I think the ultimate truth of that is going to be the fact that no 6-year-old kid who's seeing this movie now is going to be like, oh, this is awesome. There is a wider conversation to be had about Disney failing Lightyear by putting Turning Red on Disney Plus. Because people know now they can just wait until they go to Disney Plus. Like, I think Marvel hasn't hit that yet, because Marvel is still an event thing where people are going to talk about spoilers and such, but kids don't care about spoilers. Kids care about, seeing the movie. But, I think Lilo and Stitch is something that could be revisited, and could be revisited in an interesting way. I was surprised, like, it's one of those things where, like, I remember being a kid, or, like, even into adolescence, playing Kingdom Hearts and being like, it'd be so cool if they used this in a more meaningful way, because they did have it, like, Stitch was in Kingdom Hearts 2, Stitch was in, there was, a world based on it, in what was that one, Birth by Sleep, but I think that the, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if in a later game you had to collect all the little experiments, because that was the thing. It's that there were other movies too. It's like where Stitch starts getting fucked up again. There was the movie that was, I think, was a direct-to-DVD movie. That was the origin of It was the origin of the other experiments getting loose, and what was it? Like the one right before Stitch was 625, and it's this yellow version of Stitch that has all of Stitch's powers, but's just lazy and doesn't want to do anything, so he's just eating sandwiches all the time. And then they had all these other ones that were just kind of, out there. And I think that was even in the game, in Kingdom Hearts 2, where it's like we had all of these things. I think that if there is a, if there is a, if there is a Disney movie that has game potential and not just throwing Stitch into the latest thing, it's definitely Lilo and Stitch. If we're going to explore something, because there is that inherent collectability and there is all these cool ideas. They had 626 experiments going to a 65 episode series. Like, tell those stories. I think that'd be a cool thing for a video game. With bosses that you have to fight, but not really. It'd be like Bugsnax, kind of. You have to catch them without killing them or anything. You can't fight them. You have to find a way to subdue them, and then put them into put them into a place where they belong. And I think that's the whole thing of Lilo and Stitch as a whole. It's finding a person's place where they belong. Like, and that's Stitch's whole thing at the end of the movie, where it's like, this is my family. It's small and broken, but it's mine. And it's like, well, yeah, like, it's this, it is such a great story, and it's something that they haven't really done since in a meaningful way, to tell. Like, I think later Disney movies after haven't really hit that emotional impact point the same way Lilo and Stitch did. There's even like Frozen. I mean, like, look, I don't mind Frozen. I saw Frozen, didn't mind it, but I mean, come on, it's not that great. I still have to watch Moana, though. I still have not watched Moana. I did see Encanto. I don't know, I'm getting off topic here, but yeah, I think Lilo and Stitch is definitely a movie that's worth a watch if you haven't seen it, and I think there's a lot of people out there who are familiar enough with the characters and with, everything that happened. Like, people will know who Jumba and Pleakley are, and they'll know Lilo and Donnie, and they'll know, Stitch, but I would say there's probably a good amount of people who haven't seen the movie. And again, it's one of those things where, like, I watched, and the reason why I watched the movie was not because of, I think I started this, but then I didn't finish. I watched the movie not because I saw it was the 20th anniversary, but because I saw that it was, I watched Elvis, and when I saw Elvis, I had Elvis music stuck in my head. Even through now, I still have Elvis music stuck in my head after seeing that fucking movie. And moving on, like, I was like, oh, well, Lilo and Stitch had a lot of Elvis music too. Let me watch that. And then I forgot how much I liked that movie. Like, for me, it's like, again, it's easy for me to point to The Incredibles and to Ratatouille and be like, okay, I love these movies, but I don't know why it was like I forgot about how much I liked Lilo and Stitch, which is why I'm starting this little mini series. I'm not just doing this one. I'm gonna go in and do other other Disney movies and reappraising them, based on how much I liked them as a kid compared to now. So I picked out a bunch, and there are a few on the list that I have not seen before. Like, I didn't go, like, that was the thing too. It's like, I've never seen Treasure Planet. And I remember being a kid and being like, this looks fucking awesome. Like, about Treasure Planet. But I never ended up seeing it. And there's Treasure Planet, there's Hercules, there's Aladdin, there's, there is, Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was one of my favorites, and we'll see if it stays up there. But we're going with my favorites, the ones that I loved, as a kid and continued on, and we'll see how well they hold up. So I think the next one we're going to do, let's do Treasure Planet next. I think Dinosaur was another one. Dinosaur was another one that I had the game for, but never actually. I had the PlayStation 1 game, and I tried to play it. I got it for Christmas from, I think it was my aunt and uncle got it for me, for PlayStation 1. And I tried playing it, and being 6 years old, you're not exactly the most adept at playing. Like, you're the amount of space in your head to keep track of how to play games is limited by how much you can bother to remember at any given point. And I think that for me, that was another thing that I kept getting stuck on, was like, all right, what am I doing? What is this? Like, other games that I was into, it's like, all right, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do. Cool thing, collect this, do this, do this. And it's like, now walk this very long distance with this very slow-moving fucking dinosaur and do this. And it's like, well, I have other games with dinosaurs in it that I can play if I really want to. Like, I had Land Before Time for the PlayStation, and that was, a joy. And, I know it wasn't dinosaurs, but the fucking Zaboomafoo game. But, we're getting off topic again. But yeah, I think it's just that, that experience playing that fucking video game soured me on the idea of, on the idea of, what's the word I'm looking for here? On the idea of, watching the movie. But I also had the VHS for it, but I don't think I ever watched it, because I have no recollection of the movie, besides the fact there were big CGI dinosaurs, and that might just be from me looking at the cover, and I know a little bit about it because it's a ride in, that movie's biggest legacy is that one of the biggest thrill rides in Animal Kingdom is based on it, and it's like, I think that, yeah, that's probably that movie's biggest legacy. If you look at the other movies that came out in the mid-2000s, they don't really put them in the parks too much. Not entirely sure why, though. It's just weird. Anyway, we'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Treasure Planet, or preempting that with any news that may be happening between now and then. So, until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.